I think it would be good if you started today, Alicia, with a few
Okay,
ground rules.
sure. So just a reminder for those who haven't been on a Zoom call before, we just ask that you keep your microphone muted while our presenters are talking, and that way Zoom doesn't accidentally pick up sound from your living room and share that instead of what the presenter is saying. So if you notice in the background that your microphone goes red, that's probably because I'm watching in the background and making sure that microphones are muted where they're supposed to be. But we want to welcome you to have conversations in the chat window while the presenters are talking. And if you have a question, we'll have a time for Q&A after we close, and you can hang on and get an answer to that question then, and I'll make sure that we keep track of those questions and that we'll get them answered. But then at the end, of course, during the Q&A, you can unmute and ask your question then as well. But in the meantime, I will go check out the behind the scenes of the Zoom call and pass it back to Doug.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Why don't I pray us in, and then we'll get going. Father, boy, it's just great to be together as one, as your church. We thank you for being in this room with us. We just thank you for allowing us to partner with you to reach those that you love and care for, the least of these behind prison and jail walls. Bless this conversation that we have. May it reflect you. And we just give this next hour to you in your name, in your most heavenly name. Amen. All right. Thank you. I'm going to see if I can change this a little bit. There. I don't like looking at myself when I'm so big in the screen. Well, first, I'm going to have to start with, I guess, somewhat of an apology, because I think in fact, I know we sent out a confusing message with the times for these Zoom calls. We had it on our schedule that there were 8 last night and 3 this afternoon. We sent out a reminder email to all of you stating that, and then just before that 3 o'clock hour, I'm starting to get emails saying that they're confused because in the just for mentors they received, those numbers were flipped. And it was like, oh no. So what do we do with that? So we jumped on that 3 o'clock hour and just wondering if anybody showed up. And sure enough, there was a group that was in there waiting for us to show up. And we weren't prepared at all for a presentation or anything, but it was a great conversation. I don't know if any of you were in there, but it just turned out to be just a blessing to me. I know that. So, and I know some of them came anyway at night. So we didn't make anybody too mad yesterday. I'll jump on the Zoom tonight at 8 o'clock just to see if anybody's in the room, just to make an apology and have a discussion. So again, we just apologize for the confusion. The interesting thing is there were probably 5 eyes on this, and we all missed it. So we try not to do that. So okay. I'll give you a couple updates. I want to give you a couple updates in the office. During this pandemic season, there's been dramatic change for all of our lives, and as we've been talking, that includes our ministry. And Bernice is going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But through that, our office, as you can see, I'm in the downstairs of my home, and there are a number of us at the office that have not been in the office for a very long time, and so we are running at a pretty skeleton staff within the office. But now we are just beginning now to start to transition in a few at a time. And so we just want to do that wisely and not too quickly. And so I don't know exactly what that plan is. I think they're still, the leadership team is still trying to hone in on what that's going to look like. But just be assured we're starting to transition back in. So today, we have Bernice from our operations department is going to be speaking today. Our goal over the past number of Zoom calls that we've had with you has been to introduce you to different aspects of the ministry. that you are a part of. And so this is the final department. So it's last but not least for Bernice, the final department that's very close to what you do. And from here, then we're going to take a different turn with these Zoom calls. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that after Bernice. I'm looking forward to a new season, and I want your input on it. So we'll talk about that towards the end. So today I'm going to introduce Bernice. And just a quick story about Bernice is that some time ago, it's probably, I don't know, been well over a year, I was kind of rummaging through my stuff in my basement. And lo and behold, I found my my old Tier 2 certificates of completion. My graduation from Tier 2 was in a bottom drawer somewhere in pretty good shape. And so I kind of laughed about it, and it helped me reminisce. You know, I'm thinking, man, how far have I gone? Who would have known, right? Who would have known? So I brought them into work, and then Bernice was kind of looking at them, and she was looking at the handwriting on the envelope, right, Bernice? And it was her handwriting. So think about this. This was well over 20 some years ago that I received these. And Bernice had handwritten the address to me in prison in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan as a volunteer with Crossroads. And so we connect, and so here we are now working together. She's now an employee and I'm an employee. So it's just kind of a neat story. So why don't you go ahead, Bernice?
Thanks, Doug. I like to tell people I started at Crossroads when I was 5 years old. Not sure if you'll believe that or not, but hard to believe that it's been that long. So I work in the operations department, as Doug said, and we handle a lot of the process of overseeing the lessons, getting the lessons from the students to you. We mark the lessons received in the computers, we mark them forwarded to you, we send Bibles to students every week, variety of other tasks that we do that also assist other departments here at Crossroads, help out with mailings and different things like that. So it's a good variety in operations. So, give you kind of a big picture view. Before COVID hit, so say January, February this year, we had a really good number of mission support volunteers that would come into the office and do a lot of the work. I know at least one of those is on this call today. Hi, Bob. And we did not have a single operations department volunteer working at home. Then COVID. And so as of March 19, we started with one operations volunteer working from his home. And at last count, last week or early this week, we were all the way up to 29 mission support volunteers working from home on things in the operations department. So it's been something that we have increased the number slowly and gradually as we saw a need for more people to do more tasks. Then we would ask a volunteer if they'd be interested in working from home with us. So it's really been a blessing, and I'm really thankful for how well it has gone overall. So that's been one of the biggest changes that we have noticed in the building here since COVID first hit. Another change that started was right after the coronavirus first appeared in Michigan and affected us. We stopped sending the spread the word enrollment form to students with their new lessons because for the first couple weeks, we weren't able to process enrollment forms that we were getting from prospective students. And so we didn't want to be sending students this enrollment form saying, hey, ask your friends to sign up with us. But yet the enrollment forms were just kind of piling up here in the office. I'm happy to say that after a couple weeks, we were able to resume processing the enrollment forms that we received. And now, you know, for the last couple months now, we've been on a very good routine of getting those enrollment forms processed in a timely manner on a regular basis. So just last week, we restarted sending the Spread the Word enrollment forms to English-speaking students with their new lessons. As mentors, you won't see those unless you have a Tier 3 student, because for Tier 1 and Tier 2 students, we send those with a new lesson, not with the completed lessons that you see. And then this week, we just started sending the Spread the Word enrollment forms to the Spanish-speaking students again as well for a while. So that's progress, so that's a good thing. Mail volume has been down the last couple weeks. I'm sure many of you have heard about the problems and issues that the United States Postal Service is having. And yes, that is affecting Crossroads a little bit. We've noticed that our mail volume just is not as much as it was even earlier on during the pandemic. But we're making use of the time. On days when we don't get quite as much mail, then we get some work done on other projects that we've been kind of putting on the back burner for a little bit. In fact, that's what some of my team is doing right now, is working on one of those projects. So that remains to be seen, but it's obviously a matter of prayer that we pray that the post office gets their issues taken care of and that we can get our mail in a timely manner, so we can keep serving the students well. Another thing that COVID has changed is the journey of a lesson. You know, sometimes we get questions about where does a lesson go? Where all does it stop? What happens to the lesson from when it gets to from the student to you, the mentor? Well, I can explain that to you in 6 easy steps here. So step 1, the student completes the lesson and mails it to the office. So lesson arrives in our office. And then step 2 is we take that lesson and we send it to a volunteer working at home, and they scan through it and flag for us anything that we need to take care of in the office before we would send that lesson to you, the mentor. So if the student's asking for a Bible, if the student is asking for a progress letter for their judge or parole board, things like that, the volunteer will kind of put those on the outside of the lesson so that we can take care of that before that lesson gets to you. So then that lesson is brought back to our office, and then we send it to a different volunteer at home who marks it received in the computer system. Sometimes it happens in the office here with some of our staff, but quite often it's volunteers at home now doing that. And the neat thing about that is about 1.5 years ago, we launched our new computer system. And I was thinking back, if we would have still had our old computer system when the pandemic started, I really don't think that Crossroads would have been able to continue our ministry during this time, because we just would not have been able to have so many staff working from home, certainly would not have been able to have volunteers working from home on the computer. But because our computer system now is based in the cloud, all anybody needs is a computer, internet access, and then of course a username and password, and then they can work from home on the computer. So that's really an example of God's faithfulness in how he was preparing us as a ministry ahead of time for the pandemic he knew was coming, that we had no idea that this pandemic was coming. But God was still leading us and guiding us and preparing us for this time. So very, very thankful for that. So once the lesson is marked received in the computer, then the volunteer brings it back to the office. And then every week on Monday, I run a report in which the computer randomly assigns Tier 1 lessons to Tier 1 mentors. And then that's also when we print the envelopes for all the lessons, Tier 1 and Tier 2 and 3. You know, we print the envelope with your name and address on it, and then we print the envelope with the student name and address on it. So we get all those printed, and then guess what? We send those to another volunteer at home so that they can put them all together. So they put the right lessons in the right student envelopes in the right mentor envelope. And then when they're done with that, they send everything, bring everything back to us. We seal it up and get it sent out in the mail. So the last step is sending the new lesson to the student. When we mark a lesson received in the computer, that triggers the next lesson in that course to be sent to the student. So one of the things that I do is every morning when I get to work, I run a report that gives us a list of all the students that need a new lesson sent to them. So it might have 20 students who need new lesson 2 of Great Truths of the Bible, and there might be 10 students that need lesson 8 of It All Belongs to God, you know, all of our lessons. So I run that report, I print those envelopes, and then one of our staff members here combines those envelopes in a pile with the correct lesson number, puts it all in a mail bin or two, and then we send that to another volunteer's home so that she can write that lesson ID number on the back of the lesson, puts the postage paid business reply envelope in there with the spread the word, and then brings it all back to us the next day. We seal it up and drop it in the mail. So in total, there could be 4 different homes of different volunteers that one single lesson is in. It sounds like it's a cumbersome, time-consuming process, but it really works really smoothly. And when we were in the time when we couldn't have any volunteers in the building, this is how we kept going. We are blessed now. We're at the point where we can have 2 mission support volunteers per day in the operations department here in the building. So we've got a couple people, and once things change in the pandemic in the state of Michigan here, then there's a plan in place to bring back a few more volunteers. So we're eagerly looking forward to bringing back more people in the building. Last thing I want to share is a couple statistics that I track. I have some stats that I share with our staff members every week. And the most interesting one, I think, is the number of lessons that we have forwarded to you, the mentors, during this year. You can see on this chart here, it shows the number of lessons that we have forwarded to mentors each week. Varies a little, and that's to be expected. You know, people go on vacation, people need a break from lessons for a while, new mentors start, variety of factors. A really encouraging number for me is this one. During the pandemic, between March 16 and July 31, we forwarded 45,087 lessons to you mentors. Now, keep in mind that during that time, in jails and prisons in our country, there was almost no chapel services, Bible studies, anything like that, because no volunteers were allowed in. And in most states in the country, we're still not allowed in yet. So during that time, when people in prison cannot get visits from family, because there's no visitation, almost no or no Bible studies or chapel services, but they still receive the letters from you, the mentors. And that is just a testimony to God's faithfulness in provision to encourage our students and keep them built up in their faith. So consider that a pat on the back, because that's really an awesome number. Another thing I track every week is how many lessons that we mark received in the computer each week. So on this chart, you'll see the number of Tier 1 English lessons that we've received every week so far since March 23. You'll notice I talked about the mail volume fluctuating. That explains a lot of the ups and downs in these numbers. That really low week of June 29, that's because that was the week of 4th of July, so the office was closed for a few days, couple days for the holiday. But that gives you an idea of about how many lessons go through the office in a week. A smaller number is the number of Spanish lessons that we process each week. We have a high majority of our students are English speaking, but we do have a Spanish program. And as you can see, the numbers are significantly lower. But I'm happy to say that, you know, with the exception of the first 1 or 2 weeks during the pandemic, every week we've been able to mark received in the computer all the lessons that came into the office that week. So again, that's a testament to God's faithfulness and our wonderful team of staff and volunteers. We have one volunteer who used to come in the office and now works at home, and he reviews all those Spanish lessons every week and prepares them for us to receive them in the computer. So that is kind of a snapshot of the operations department. Doug, is there anything you can think of that I should have mentioned at this point? I know we have a Q&A coming up. You're muted.
You'd think I'd get used to that. We can save it. Yeah, there's. I think you hit a lot of the top points for everybody. Always an interest. You know, last night I hadn't really put it all into context. So we made it simple for me with the 6 steps, but I just didn't. It didn't click with me that those lessons had actually been in 4 people's homes before we were able to get it to wherever it needed to go. That is just unbelievable. So great job with that. That's awesome. So, well, thank you. So why don't we finish up? I have a few things and then we'll open it up. And so as I do on most all of these calls, I just want to encourage you to think about who in your network, who in your friend group, your life groups, church group, adult Sunday school group, that would potentially be interested in hearing about why they should serve the prisoner. Why is it important for the church to reach the prisoner? I would love to join you in a conversation on that through Zoom, and then of course the how do we do that, and that's through Crossroads. So that's an open invitation if you would like to do that, at least even have that discussion. You can contact me through mentor@cpministries.org, and I'm confident that Alicia will have that in the chat box. During this time, it's difficult for us to gather as people to share that story, to grow the ministry when we're in a especially during this time, that how important it is to really think about and to actually grow the ministry at this time, because as Bernice said, there are many chapels that are not functioning inside the prison. Volunteers across the country, really across the world, are not able to come in and share the love and hope of Jesus Christ. And so the one avenue that has been left open is for you and I and us as Crossroads to go inside and visit the prisoner through the way that we do that. I was going to talk a little bit about these mentor gatherings. These community gatherings. When we started doing those, it was just a thought. Let's see what happens, and they've just been wonderful to do it. Great to get to talk to you guys, to grow a sense of community, a sense of oneness together, because we have about 3,200 mentors, and they're dispersed across the country, and so it's really hard for us all to gather in one area, but through technology we can do that. And, it's really, I was just talking to somebody before I got on here. I said, this is my favorite part of the week, is to come gather with the mentors. And so very thankful for that, because, before COVID, one of my regular routines was to go travel and go to you. I would go to churches, go to different organizations to present the ministry. And that's been cut off. So we've been doing it through Zoom. And when we do these gatherings, it's been really good. And so when we look ahead at these gatherings, we were thinking about okay, what's next? We've gone through, we've really, you know, tried to help you understand the ministry better. And so we've gone through the whole office. So we would like to focus on how can we better equip you to do what you do? How can we better empower you to serve and visit the prisoner as you do? And so next month we will be doing a letter writing workshop. And from there, or even now, what I would like to hear from you is, what would you like to hear? How can we better equip you through this venue? How can we better empower you through this venue? Is there something that you would like to hear about? Would you like to learn about? Would you like to have the discussion about? Is it something like you'd like to hear more about? What does the prison environment look like in more detail? You know, who are we serving in more detail? What is reentry? You know, I speak about reentry on occasion. Well, what does that really mean? What does reentry mean? And because we have to remember in that particular subject that 96% of those that we incarcerate will be returning back to our community. And so what does that mean for us as the church? So I'd really like to hear from you. You can go ahead and email me on that mentor email, and that'll get to me, and we'll go from there. So thank you. I thank you in advance for considering that. And so we're going to end now, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. But I want to end in the spirit of the Just for Mentors. So I wanted to talk today about restoration. So why don't you pull up that slide, Alicia? And I jotted down some notes to keep me on track. And of course, when I'm speaking about this, as I often do when I talk about the prisoner, I'm often generalizing. But when we look at those we sentence and then incarcerate, those that have caused us harm, we have to remember they're incarcerated because in some way they have caused harm to another person or the community, and that we no longer consider them part of our community. They are pulled out, they're literally pulled out and taken away. They are cast out of our communities, and the not welcome sign goes on our door. Often they are looked at as unredeemable. This message is made clear to those that serve their time and continues when they are released and returned to our communities. Because really, as I was alluding to prior to this, the beginning of the program, they're serving a life sentence. It's an unspoken life sentence. Their conviction never, ever goes away. My conviction will never go away. And we must contend with it for the rest of our lives. And the sad and interesting fact is that there are over 40,000, that's 40,000 collateral consequences that come with a felony conviction, affecting all aspects of one's life. Yet when we look at the Bible, we see a story of restoration that rises above what society may want to tell us. We see the story of Israel and Judea. We see the story of King David and of Paul. A story that through Jesus, we can be washed clean and made whole. So your tip as you write your student is talk about what restoration may mean to you. Share with your student that that we all can be restored, despite what all of us, what we may have done, our circumstances, or what others may be telling us. Tell them, and you can literally tell them that they are not an outcast. Share that they are or can be part of a community of believers called the church. And this tip was driven by Jeremiah 30, verse 17. But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord, because you are called an outcast, Zion, for whom no one cares. And in closing, I think about, what does God think about? What does he see through his eyes for those that have caused harm and that we have cast aside. So thank you for coming today. If you want to pull that screen down, thank you for listening. It was great. And we'll just open it up for questions and answers, and we'll finish that.